said, bring your truck back, all the tools and equipment, bring it back, you're done. And I fired him. I fired him. I fired his son, his stepson. And I just, at that point, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm working 100 hours a week to get these guys 40. It was just, to me, it wasn't worth it.
Hello and welcome to Business Underdog, the podcast where we bring you inspiring stories for the aspiring entrepreneur. I'm your host, Eric Remer, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this exciting journey. Welcome to Business Underdog. I am your host, Eric Remer. I'm really excited about today's guest, David C. Heffner, former owner of Heffner Plumbing and current plumber foreman with the Indiana National Guard at Stout Field in Indianapolis. What I loved about this conversation is how practical and honest David is about business ownership. He talks openly about the early cash flow challenges, hiring mistakes, customer trust, technology, and what it really takes to run a small service business. This is a thoughtful, grounded conversation with a lot of hard-earned lessons for anyone building a business in the trades or thinking about going out on their own. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. David, thank you for taking the time to join me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Eric. I'm glad to be here.
So I always like to start at the beginning. You kind of built a successful business. You ultimately sold it. We'll get to that in a second. But take me back to the beginning. What inspired you to start your own plumbing company?
I have high standards. I always have in terms of whatever it might be. And when I was working for other companies as an apprentice and then as a journeyman, I see things that it's like, well, can't we do this better? Can't we communicate better with the customer? I was always asking questions. I got to a point, as a plumber that, I was like, okay, if I'm going to do it, now's the time. And so after about 10 years of working as a plumber, I went ahead and got my plumbing contractor's license, which allowed me to start my own plumbing company. From that point, I was working out of I had a Chevy Silverado and worked out of that. And then I just kind of went from there.
That's great. Your story is so symbiotic with so many successful kind of tradespeople that were doing something. They saw gaps in the market or they just didn't like how things were done. What were some of the things early on prior to starting your own company that you just didn't feel like the customers were getting what they deserved? What were some of the biggest gaps in the market that you saw at that time?
I mean, one of the things was transparency. And I'm going to I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but there's, flat rate pricing started with the automotive industry years ago. Well, the plumbing industry adopted flat rate pricing and a lot of companies have embraced this. And basically you show up at somebody's home, they need a new garbage disposal. Well, here's the price for that. The last company that I worked for had just adopted flat rate pricing and we were told what our hourly rate was, but we were not to share that with the customer. So yeah, X amount of dollars is what we charge an hour, but you're supposed to base everything on the information in the price book. And I had one situation where I was doing a major repipe in a older home. And I gave the customer the price and she's like, what's the breakdown? And I was like, well, this is based on a national standard, which is what we're told to tell the customer. And she said, what is the labor? What is the material? What is the sales tax? And I just had to, I kept repeating myself. After the third time, she said, you know what? Just do it. And I felt so bad because I could have answered her question, but I would have lost my job probably. It was very frustrating because the thing about flat rate is they're essentially hiding what the hourly rate is. And I swore that if I were to ever start my own company, everything would be transparent. Now, that's tough, when you're charging $170 an hour. And some people are like, I'm not paying that. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but that's what it costs. But when I started my own company, I made sure people knew this is the hourly rate. This is material, this is the tax. So no smoke and mirrors. In this industry, in this day and age, if you want to make a living that's going to provide you with a retirement and all the other things, you have to go flat rate. And I was like, well, yeah, maybe not. And the one thing, the one thing I'll be the first to admit is if I'd gone flat rate and done it the way everybody else did it, yeah, I might have more money than I do, or instead of 1 home, maybe we own 5 homes. It comes to a point where it's like, I need to be able to sleep at night, and,
Yeah.
so to me, it was more important to be honest. I mean, if any plumbers hear this, they're gonna think, "This guy's he's naive," and, I guess they can say whatever they want. The bottom line is that doing it the way I did, basically time and material, and letting people know exactly what I charge, all of a sudden that creates a sense of trust. In the 20 years that I was in business, I had basically from day one, the lady that I had to do that repipe for that I couldn't tell her the breakdown became a customer of mine. And she
Right.
was with me the whole time I was in business.
That's great. So, you took the leap, you started your own business. What should people understand about the reality of running a small business? Some of the things you ran into, and specifically as you started, you have a business, you're a licensed plumber, you have a contractor, but you got to generate cash flow. You got to run your business. What are some of those lessons with regard to cash flow challenges that you faced early on?
Yeah, it's hard. We had savings to get us started, but that it's not it wasn't millions of dollars. It was a small amount to get going, and then credit cards and beg, borrow, not steal, but it was just do whatever you could to make ends meet, but a lot of hustling. And if people were like, I'm building a home and it's 2 hours away, it was like I didn't have in the beginning the luxury of saying no within reason. And so it's a lot of scrambling to try and get everything going. 2 years into the business, or was it probably even longer than that, I was able to get a line of credit through my bank, which helped a lot. But, I mean, I think initially you need to know what your true costs are. I mean, the truck
Yeah.
payment and insurance and fuel, the cost to have an accountant. It's very important to have a good accountant and a good bookkeeper. If that accountant's not doing your bookkeeping, you need to get a good bookkeeper. Um, Knowing what those costs, your true costs are, is gonna help you determine, "This is what I'm gonna do as far as what I'm charging." But I would say that in the very beginning, you need to know what your costs are and then create a budget. Once you get that established, it's like, okay, create a budget of, "This is what I'm gonna spend on fuel, on, vehicles and whatever else," and try and stick to that. And it's easier said than done. I think initially you just need to know what the costs are. And in the beginning, call around. It's like, I need a new water heater. What do you charge? I would just to find out what the market was doing.
Interesting. That's really smart, by the way. That's really smart. I get asked this all the time, David, from solopreneurs and different people in the trades who want to start their own business. So they want to take the leap. They kind of put the shingle up there, and it could be trades, it could be a therapist, it could be someone in legal. They all have the same questions and the same challenges. How do you get new business? How did you build your business from I want to do this to people are going to call me and I'm going to, get business. I'm just curious your journey from having no customers to building a really successful platform.
Right. It was a combination of things. In the beginning, it was just, reaching out to friends and family and letting people know that I'd started my own company, going to customers like the lady that I couldn't share the
Yeah.
information with. I went to her house and I was like, okay, I've started my own company. Here's my information. If you need anything, let me know. I visited a lot of folks that I had done work for in the past and just letting them know that I've started my own company, and I guess people could say, "Well, you're stealing business from your former employer," and I'm like, "Okay, that wasn't the intent." I guess it was just trying to let people know that, "Hey, you're happy with what I did.
Yep.
I'm no longer with this company. I've gone out on my own. Here's my information." So there was a lot of revisiting people that I'd done work for in the past, but then the friends and family thing, talking to other contractors. I met a plumber at a plumbing supply house who had more work than he could handle. So he used me as a
Interesting.
subcontractor. It was this mixed bag of stuff to make it
Yeah.
all happen. Later on, social media really kinda helped
Yeah.
me, get going.
That's great.
But yeah,
It's
yeah.
shifting gears a little bit. Every entrepreneur has the challenges that they run into. And I'm just curious, I hear the different things from different people, but who or what has been your greatest source of inspiration or really motivation in this entrepreneurial journey that you've had over the last 20 plus years?
I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years. I went to college for a year, found out that was not the right thing for me, and so I joined the Marine Corps, and that was the best decision I made as a young person because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up working as a helicopter mechanic on Cobra helicopters. The Marine Corps taught me a lot of things, discipline, motivation, the list goes on and on and on. But the culture that the Marine Corps has is something that's really kind of helped me to get me to where I am today. I mean, there are a lot of other things. I'm very passionate about being a Marine and the organization. And granted, the Marine Corps is not perfect, but it
Yeah.
taught me a lot of things. And that's really kind of helped me along the way, and the Marine Corps doesn't breed quitters. They breed people to win, whatever the objective is, take that hill.
Yeah.
But the Marine Corps, I think the culture and the institution, has been very instrumental in getting me to where I am today.
That's amazing. That's great. You know, again, switching gears a little bit, with AI and technology being such a top of mind for everybody in every field and every trade, you were really early bringing technology into the field. What drove that? What was your decision process to bring some of that technology before there was integrated softwares, before there was mobile iPads to take payments or schedule and things of that nature? So I'd love to hear what you did and what was that motivation behind that?
I can remember working for companies and everything with paper invoices. Well, I like to explain everything that I've done. Well, sometimes it felt like I was writing a book and I would be using multiple invoices to be able to summarize everything that I did on the job. And I'm thinking to myself, this is stupid. Why, why am I doing this? And so I kept thinking, there's got to be a way to make this work. So when I first started, it was paper invoices. When I could afford it on a laptop, and I was like, well, okay, how do I make this work? Well, I found out about portable printers. And then with QuickBooks, I had QuickBooks on my computer at home, and then I would just back up. I'd back up in the morning and load that onto my laptop. At the end of the day, reverse the process, and everything that I entered in QuickBooks got loaded back onto the computer at home. But I was printing my invoices, my estimates on cardstock. So wasn't just regular printing paper, it was cardstock. And I'd hand this to people, and they're like, what's this? And it's like, it's your invoice. It's like, and they feel it, and it's like, "Wow, that's impressive." And I was
Interesting.
like, "Well, thank you." And it was like, "How did you do that?" And I said, "I've got a laptop and a portable printer in my truck." I had customers who were like, "Can I see this?" And I
That's
would
really
show them the
funny.
setup. And I had a stand. I talked to a local police department that was, utilizing laptops in their patrol cars. So I did some research to find out how they did that, what equipment they were using. So I was able to get a stand for my laptop, and then I just had the printer up on a little shelf that I had in the truck. And then I had an inverter to run the printer. So it took time, but I figured it all out because I was like, I know there's a better way, and it was just a matter of talking to people, doing the research, and then making it happen.
Did you feel that that technology was a differentiator in the market that people really had? I think about technology now where it's gone from what you were doing to kind of the vertical SaaS to the mobile apps to integrated real-time estimates, which really professionalize even the smallest outfit against the bigger ones. Did you feel some
Mm.
of the things you were doing from a technology standpoint helped you differentiate and really provided you the credibility even though you were a smaller shop?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It takes that level of professionalism, a step higher. And
Yeah.
people when when I do this and they're like, "How did you do this?" And I had one customer tell me, "You did this?" He said, "Did your wife help you figure this out?" And I looked at him and I was like, my wife's a computer programmer. I said, no, I did. And I always tell people, my wife is the brains in our operation. I'm the brawn. But I actually had a customer, say to me, it's like, so when I explained to him, what I'd done and how I did it, he was very intrigued. He was a former retired business owner. I guess plumbers are supposed to be smart. I don't know, whatever. But
I don't know.
it,
I
it,
think
it,
that
it
mindset's shifting right now. I think people are realizing that being in the trades, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, or anything like that, is actually a really smart way to go now. So you're building up this business. You're getting some traction. You have good customers, cash flow stable, and you decide to bring on your kind of first kind of employee, bring on an additional truck. Walk me through how that experience worked for you early on.
prior to hiring my first employee, I'd sign on with a guy that was a business coach. I attended one of his seminars and signed on because I just thought, well, this is the right thing to do. So I started having sessions with this guy, and we got to a point. It's like, okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay a one man shop the rest of your life, or do you want to grow? And I was just like, because at that point I was on the fence. But the way he put it to me, it was like it just made me mad. And he's like, you got to do something. Decide. Stay small. If you're going to stay small, you probably don't need me or grow your company where I can help you. And I was like, all right. So he made me mad, and I was just like, fine, I'll show you. So there was a plumber that I'd worked with, and he wasn't happy where he was at, and he was a friend. We've been talking ever since I started my company. He said, let me know when you're ready to grow the business. I'd be happy to come work for you. So I hired this friend, went out and leased a brand new box truck. I mean, this thing was huge. Had it repainted. The company colors were this really dark metallic blue that most companies were doing that. I mean, vans were white. Work trucks were white in the trades. So I got this really beautiful blue that Chevrolet had come out with. My pickup was this color blue. We had his truck painted to match my pickup, had it lettered, got him set up with a laptop and a portable printer, uniforms, and got him going. And what I didn't know was that he talked a good game, but he wasn't really a very good plumber. I mean, we got things going and things were going okay. He knew a guy that did sewer and drain work. So 6 months after I hired this first plumber, I hired this guy for sewers and drains. The mistake I made was that I hadn't set up a marketing plan for that. So a lot of it was just word of mouth. He wasn't a licensed plumber, so I was limited in what type of work he could do, and got him a new van, laptop, portable printer. I was just spending money like it was crazy, and I was just maxed out as far as credit cards and everything else. But keep. I was trying to grow the business,
Yep.
and then finally, 3 months after I hired the sewer drain guy, I had to let him go. Year and a half with the plumber. In 2 weeks, I'd gotten phone calls from three different customers complaining about the work that had been done. And then one of the jobs, he'd installed a reverse osmosis drinking water system under the kitchen sink, flooded the kitchen because it leaked.
Ugh,
And so I had to go back and fix the leak, pay for the water damage. After the third phone call, I was just, I called this guy and I was like, listen, you've had three callbacks in the last 2 weeks. There's a problem. I asked him,
yeah.
is everything okay at home? He says, everything's fine. I said, are you okay? He said, I'm fine. I said, well, there's a problem. And if you can't tell me what it is, then you're done. And I said, bring your truck back, all the tools and equipment, bring it back, you're done. And I fired him. I fired him. I fired his son, his stepson. And I just, at that point, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm working 100 hours a week to get these guys 40. And it was just, to me, it wasn't worth it. And I just,
Yeah.
and I wasn't cut out, I'll be the first to admit it. I wasn't cut out to manage uh, these guys when my name is on the side of the truck. I kept the van that I bought for the sewer and drain guy, but we had to take out a second mortgage. My wife had suggested it to pay off that box truck because we were upside down on the lease. We sold it at auction. My wife suggested we get a second mortgage to pay off the truck with the understanding that you're paying this back. It's like, this isn't coming out of the family budget. Your company is paying the second mortgage. You're paying this off. So just consider this a loan. And I did. I paid off the second mortgage, and it was a very, very painful lesson. If it hadn't been for my wife, I would have had to declare bankruptcy, and I would have gone out of business.
Wow.
So
Well,
she more than
having that
once.
amazing partner.
Yeah, no, she wasn't an officer in the business. Initially, she had asked about being made part of the company. I said, officially, no. I did that, again, the friends and family thing with business. I just was like, I'm going to come to you for advice and help, but no, I'm not going to make you an officer. I'm not going to make you part of this company. And I think that was a good thing. Some people may argue that my wife's name is Deb. I didn't make her part of the company, but in a lot of ways, she was very much a part of Heffner Plumbing.
It's great. And so a lot of people don't realize, I mean, a lot of people start adding trucks and they build a business because they believe that's the only way they can ultimately get an exit of their business. But you had a successful exit, were able to kind of merge with another organization, even with the business you had built, and you had built it up for enough credibility, enough scale, which is really great, which is a path that many people don't know ultimately maybe exists or exists in a positive way. So talk more about how that came about and kind of the transition to kind of what you're doing now.
So over 20 years, I just continue to build the momentum as far as social media. I had an email newsletter that I sent out every month with tips, tricks. Some of it had family information, and I actually had a customer that would print off my newsletters and put them in a file every month. She would print off these newsletters and hang on to them. I had a website. I was posting on Facebook, LinkedIn. I had a blog. I was doing all these things, and it's just, again, how can I be different from all the other plumbing companies that are out there, and trying to
Yeah.
differentiate myself? My personal appearance, all my work shirts are similar to what I'm wearing today, but they were starched. I took them to a dry cleaner. I had my uniform shirts starched, and people are like, "Is your shirt starched?" And I was like, "Yes, it is." So I always wanted to do things differently, but be as professional as I possibly could. My van, I always kept it clean inside and out. My last van actually had a design. I had a graphic artist create this design. We worked with a company that did wraps. People would turn their heads. I had a customer who's like, I saw you from a mile away and I knew it was you because it was that distinctive. There was a logo of a plumber on the side, the Heffner name, the phone number, and the website. So in 2020, I merged with a company called Williams Comfort Air and Mr. Plumber. They don't normally buy one-man shops, but they saw what I built and my reputation in the local community, and they're like, okay, we want this guy on board with us. I merged with them in 2020, and then I signed a 2-year contract. I went from being a one-man shop to working for a company with 500 employees in 4 different
Wow.
locations, 4 different states. I didn't like it. And what I quickly found out was that being a plumber with over 30 years of experience, I became the go-to guy for almost not all, but a lot of the trouble calls. And if there was
Yeah.
something that was falling apart, the dispatchers were like, okay, we need to send Hefner to go take care of this. So in 2022, at the end of my contract, I told my boss, it's like, listen, I'm done. I thought I was going to hang on, but I can't do this. I can't work for a big company. It's not me. But they got my customer list. They got the van. They got all my big equipment. They bought me out lock, stock, and barrel. At that point, I retired, and retirement lasted about 4 months, and then I went to work for a plumbing supply house and was there for 2.5 years.
It's amazing the basic business principles, high integrity, doing the right thing. I hear it over and over again from successful people like you in all fields and specifically in the trades because not everyone, well, in any industry, but holds up to those types of standards could really be a differentiator. And as you've now left, kind of the plumbing world, you kind of retired. I'd love to learn more about how you bring that kind of knowledge into kind of the mentorship and why mentoring young people who are entering the trades is so important to you. And I assume it has a lot to do with teaching them to do the right things the way you did. But I'd love to hear it from you.
While I was at Mr. Plumber, my boss at the time was also an instructor at a plumbing apprenticeship school here in Indianapolis. And for years, he's been asking me to become an instructor. And owning your own business, I was like, I can't do this. That's a big time commitment. But when I sold my business and went to work for Williams Comfort Air, I couldn't say no anymore. So I became an instructor. For me, it was a game changer because all of a sudden I'm reaching people that are just getting started in the industry. And I'm able to share stories and my knowledge and experience with these people that are just getting started. And so that was 5 years ago. Just like with my customers, with my students, I care and they know it. They know I care about them. They know they can call me anytime. I've got students that to this day will call me. They haven't been in my class for several years that will call and it's like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Or "I'm on this job. I don't know what to do. What do you think?"
Interesting.
And I was like, "Okay, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that?" I mean, I had one student that, long story short, he sold a $5,000 repipe in a house based on the information I had given him. And I was like, you could do what's called a spot repair with galvanized pipe, or you can repipe the whole house. Give the customer options. Price out
Yeah.
the repair, price out the whole thing, and explain to him. It's like with galvanized pipe, there's no guarantees. He ended up selling a $5,000 job based on the advice I'd given him. And I
Oh,
mean,
that's
I'm
great.
glad he did it. And I'm not standing there with my hand out like, "Oh, where's my cut?" That's not what it's about. It's just helping him however I can. My students, we have 32 classes at mechanical skills, and we had the highest GPA of all the classes at mechanical skills.
Well,
And that's
that's
never
amazing.
been my goal, but I push them. And it's like, we have quizzes and stuff. And it's like, you could do better. I hold their feet to the fire. I hold them to a higher standard than I think some instructors do. But yeah, we finished out last year as the top class in
That's
terms of the
amazing.
grade point average. It goes back to my commitment to being an instructor, my commitment to doing everything I possibly can to teach these students the right things. I've run into students on jobs.
Well, you have a lot of wisdom to share, obviously, which is why you enjoy giving them well, which is why you enjoy it. To tie it in a bow and really, provide some of that wisdom you can towards the end of this, what are the top 3 lessons you would share with aspiring business owners that you've learned along the way? Sounds like you get to share a lot of that wisdom on a more frequent basis with your students, but I would love the top 3 lessons that you would love to share.
So there's got to be an understanding that if you're going to start a business, you got to be all in. It's like if you want 9 to 5, go work for a bank, go do something else. Starting your own business is a commitment. If you're not committed, don't do it. It's 24/7. It never ends. It's it never ends. If you build something, a company, and you've got layers of management that can help run the company, that's great. You've got to be totally committed if you're going to do this. The other thing is you want to make sure if you're going to do this, it's very, very important to get a good accountant. The accountant that I started with, got me started on QuickBooks to track all of my expenses. And then I guess the last thing is the family and friends that I've talked about before in the past. You're going to be hesitant because of that relationship with a family member or a friend. Those relationships are going to cloud your judgment as far as business is concerned, unless you're cutthroat and you're just like, I don't care. It's like, I'll fire my wife, I'll fire my son, whatever. I value relationships, but that just made it hard for me. And so try to hire outside of the realm of family or friends.
Well, David, I can't thank you enough for both taking the time, sharing your story, sharing your trials and tribulations, and most importantly, sharing your lessons and wisdom with other people that are gonna be in the similar spot that you were at, 25 plus years ago. So I just wanna thank you again, David. Thank you for joining me on this episode. I'd like to invite you to subscribe to Business Underdog on your favorite podcast platform. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode and you'll be the first to hear these incredible stories. Please be sure to follow us on social and visit our website at businessunderdog.com for episode updates, resources, and more. And thank you for listening today. Until next time, stay inspired, keep pushing forward, and embrace your inner underdog.